The United States slave descendants of African origin who are a non-self-governing people, who are aliens to, enemies of, and rebellious to the United States government, except when they're restrained by force and violence and genocide. This genocide takes the place then in the form of even the miseducation of the slave descendant of African origin by the running dogs and lackeys of U.S. imperialism who are black, or the imperialists themselves who maintain control over the educational institutions. Linguistics is a science. It's a method that is developed to describe very precisely and accurately what one sees. What we have are a lot of our own people trained in English departments or speech departments. That's prescribing. What they do is vacillate from basic axiomatic premises, and that is, the English language is considered to be Germanic because it has a morphological continuity. Even though the English language has borrowed 80% of its vocabulary from the Romance languages, English is akin to German and Swedish and Danish and Dutch, just as Spanish and French and Portuguese and Romanian are related because of the morphological patterning, the inflectional system of those languages. So what we find then is that the Europeans who have been looking at our languages, it's like looking at a zebra, and one man is saying that it's a black animal with white stripes, and the other is saying it's a white animal with black stripes. It seems more cogent and logical to me to recognize that a zebra is in fact a black animal with white stripes if we first acknowledge that it at one time was all black until this albino animal came along, and now we see some surface evidence of that contact. Most slave descendants of African origin are limited English speaking. What I say is not because I say so. I looked at the standardized instruments that are used by Europeans to assess the language dominance of slave descendants of African origin, and systematically throughout the state of Washington, systematically in California, and throughout the United States for that matter, we've come up limited English and non-English speaking. Now, Native Americans were here in the United States before African Americans, but because they've been living on reservations in social isolation from the Indo-European languages that became dominant in this country, they are justly entitled to and are given English as a second language. Let me finish this point. The Hispanic American was here in the Southwest before the African American. And because they live in barrios in social isolation from the dominant Euro-American English-speaking population, they are justly entitled and are given English as a second language. Asian Americans, though, unless you consider the Native Americans to be Asiatic, Asian Americans in the Lau versus Nickel decision in California were recognized as non-English or limited English speaking because of linguistic retentions from their autochthonous Asian languages, and were justifiably and are justly entitled to and are given English as a second language. But whenever it comes to this big black barbed wire bushy-head bubble-lipped black man, he's profoundly, severely, moderately, or grossly mentally retarded, depending on the proficiency that they show on Eurocentric tests.
Just as a remark, just a little follow-up to what he just said. There are some elements that he brought out that I'd like to just comment on. The connections between the African and the Afro-American, or Ebonics, really, the African language. One interesting thing you brought out is the fact that people have described the black English speakers here as being deficient or as being limited.
Yes.
It's very interesting because when we look at this area of tense in English language, so many people accuse speakers of Ebonics, as you termed it, as being deficient, not using the correct grammar or tense. And it's very interesting because it goes back historically to Africa. And I'm saying this because in most African languages, and I would just want to see your reaction to this, to get your reaction to this. The languages are influenced by the African conception of time. In other words, the African does not consider tense as so important in his language. He considers the aspect of the event rather than the time that the event occurred. And I think this has influenced to a large extent the speaking or the English, black English speakers here, because a term like somebody says he coming or he working, or something like he be working. Now he working shows something momentarily. Momentary. He be working means he always does. He always works. It's habitual. And I'm trying to connect this with the African background because in most African languages we put more emphasis on the aspect of the event rather than when it actually happened. Time does not control the people. People control the time. And I see that there are some connections here with Ebonics.
Let me go back to my original premise. First of all, languages are made up of sound. So let's go back to, before even looking at tense, let's look at what happens. Let me go to the board here. I want to give you an example of the phonetic structure. I've given you some handouts there concerning this absence of consonant cluster configurations. This consonant vowel vocalic pattern that is indicative of what most African languages are, first has to be seen in terms of that kind of what's called relexification. Relexification is the process of learning a language, but you do not know the grammar of that language or the phonology of that language, so you borrow the lexemes, but you're not familiar with their articulations or their verb system. You're dealing first at the level of tense. I'm dealing also here first with the phonemic pattern. If I tell you something like Ju, eat, cho, jello. This is juicho jello. Juicho jello means did you eat your jello? But you notice this consonant vowel vocalic pattern. We're looking at a morphophonemic rule. West African languages and the descendants of West African people in the United States do not use consonant vowel configurations. Da, T, sh, she, mean, consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel, consonant vowel. You see this vocalic pattern. That's number one. That the black man in the United States, according to Peter Ladderfoget. So if I'm lying, Ladderfoget's got me lying. You also have a handout there from William Welmers who says that you don't find consonant cluster configurations in Niger, Congo, Nilo-Saharan, or in any languages. You don't find doubly articulated stops. So what we find then is, first of all, this morphophonemic pattern. Now, let's go to this question that you have of tense. This notion then that there's a deleted copula. You ask the child, where's your mother? And the child will respond, she gone. The absence of a copula is interpreted by Zionists and U.S. imperialists as a deleted copula. As you have pointed out, there is no copula languages, copula verb in Afro-Asiatic languages. I have up here an example. Here's the Arabic statement, Asmi Abdullah. My name, Abdullah. This is a prefix, suffix for possessive. My name, Abdullah. Ana min Kuwait. My name is Abdullah. I from Kuwait. Not I am from Kuwait. Min wain inta, from where you. There's no copula verb. This copula does not exist. Karim min Beirut fi Lebanon. Karim is from Beirut in Lebanon. Huwa tabib fil mustashfa. He doctor.